Hi, this is Isabel Litzler. So thank you for joining today on the How to Register Business in Switzerland. So today I'm pretty sure some of you are entrepreneurs, business owners, or you have an idea and you just have some questions about how to start a business. So I will cover all these different things today. I recommend that you ask me questions after each section. And there's a Rubik's Cube now on the YouTube video where you can click and ask a question. So I have about 4 sections to cover. So after each one, I leave enough time for you to ask me questions. If for whatever reason you can't ask a question, I will go back to Meetup a little bit later today to answer questions, and I will also be available by email, of course. So there's basically 4 different things that I want to cover about the topic today that will give you some direction. So the first one is about work permits. That's a huge one in Switzerland for anything connected to working in general. The second thing is about approvals that you need for certain things. So I wanted to make a special on that as well. The registration process itself. And finally, the statuses that are available for you to pick from. So first of all, it's really about something I wanted to give you is about a checklist. So what are the type of things you should be wondering when you want to create a business? So the first one in Switzerland is about nationality. What nationality are you? And I will talk about that a bit more in detail under the work permit process, because there's some limitations depending on what your nationality is. And that's a big Swiss type of requirement. This also happens in other countries. For example, in the United States where I worked, it's the same thing. You need approvals based on your nationality. The second thing is about funding. This is not the topic of today's webinar, but funding is very important. What do you have available to start a business? Are you starting from complete scratch? Do you have a bit of money aside? That will also determine what type of, what are your potential activities, basically. Do you need any special authorizations? Another thing is, do you plan from the beginning to be a solopreneur, or do you have a vision for something? And I think this is important. I didn't think about that myself. It's only after the fact I realized that there's different things you should be aware of when you start a business. So for example, now there's the laptop lifestyle. I know I talked about that in different videos. And laptop lifestyle is really about, I want to create a business to have my own working hours and also enjoy my life. So this is something that you build around your lifestyle. Whereas a startup, for example, the idea from the beginning is to go big. So I want to be the next Google, or the next Facebook, or what have you. And I want to be a multinational. That's also going to change how you work on your business plan. Which risk are you willing to take? That's also important. Do you plan to do business in Switzerland only or global? That has a huge impact. So all these questions, basically, I'm wondering right now for you is basically a business plan. It's the things that you should be aware when you work on your business plan. Are your clients individuals or companies? So for example, in my situation, my clients are individuals. However, I could have picked a business where I work with companies and I'm selling directly to companies. That's a bit different also in how you work, what your processes are, how you bill, etc., etc. And what is your target income? That could vary based on, again, what kind of business you want to set up. Do you want to set up a business where you can make a decent salary, or do you want to go big, and et cetera, et cetera? So these are just some of the tips to know basically what kind of direction you're taking from the beginning. So my tips would be to definitely do a business plan, because this is going to give you a clear direction of where you want to go. And this will actually be necessary for certain registration processes in Switzerland to sort out the work permit situation. And basically my story when I started January 2015, registered my business in Switzerland, is that I wanted to be independent. For me, that was one of the main things, more the liberal kind of thing, or independent, freelance, whatever you call it. So I wanted to be a one-person shop. And that was very clear for me. That's something that I enjoy. That's something that suits my personality. So it was all part of the business plan, is I want to be a one-person shop, and I want to work with people one-to-one, mainly. That's what I enjoy. So it eliminated certain other options, and that's why I picked the independent status, which I will talk about in a minute. So the first thing is really, for me, when you start a business in Switzerland, is to talk about work permits. This is very, very important because that determines what you can do with your situation. So I have a lot of clients who are a bit confused as well, because sometimes also if you're married to someone, if it's a Swiss, if it's another expat in Switzerland, the permits may vary. You also have work permits that are different in the international organizations. And they also give you the right to work, but only in international organizations. And the day when you leave, your permit goes. So it's a bit different than the private sector where you get different types of permits. And then there's also the frontalier permit. So basically you have three kinds of permits. So international organizations, private sector, and frontalier, which is called the G work permit. And they all give you different, again, different rights. So if you're a frontalier, for example, you're bound to the company where you work. So once that ends, your permit ends. Same thing with the international organizations. With the B permit or the C permits, the resident permits, you can do whatever you want, and you can also switch. So there's different levels of permits, so to say. Most of you, I assume, again, it's an assumption that you're expats or you're international. So you're bound to either a company or you came for a spouse, etc. So you have a permit, you have a work permit basically. Or if you're just arrived in Switzerland, you don't have one, or you only have the residential permit. So you need to have a valid work permit. And that's also bound to the kind of activities that you want to do. So for example, if you follow a spouse or you end up in Switzerland and you say, well, you know, the job market is not great, I want to start my own business. But then because permits are also linked to your activity, it's like the catch-22, you know, which one should you do first? So when you have an employer that picks you, typically they will do the work for you. They will apply for the work permit, get you the right to work. When you want to create a business, obviously you're not connected to a business. So there's basically two things. Either you have the work permit already granted because of your husband or your wife, and then that's a little bit easier because at least that's one thing taken care of. If you don't have that, you need to get it through the business that you're creating. So, so you need to be granted a permit based on business creation. And that can vary also depending on what kind of business and your nationality. That's why I was saying earlier, what is your nationality? If you're Swiss, or I mean, if you're EU, Swiss, you don't even need a work permit, but if you're EU, technically, the chances of getting a permit if you're creating a business is going to be higher than if you're outside of the European Union. So by that, I mean, the scrutiny is going to be a bit different because again, there's this notion of what are you trying to achieve in Switzerland, what kind of business, etc. And you would need to show a bit more documents. So for example, if you're EU, maybe they only ask you for the business plan. If you're outside EU, they will want a bunch of documents. They will want to know your resume, references, etc., etc. So you will have to build a higher, bigger file, basically. And I would recommend that you work with an attorney on that, someone that could really support you through the process. So we'll talk about application a bit later. But the work permit basically is something you need to do. So based on where you live, the process will be different. And that's why, I guess one of the things I should have mentioned is that this presentation is mostly geared towards Geneva. That's the process I know better. I will try to give you some tips of where to go if you're not based in Geneva. But based on where you live, process can vary a little bit. For example, if you're in Geneva, you only go to the cantonal office, and that's where they deal with all the work permits. And I believe in Lausanne, it's the same thing. But if you live outside of those two cities, you might have to go to the communal office, and then they will give you the process to apply for a work permit. So again, it can vary based on the canton where you live. They can ask also for different documents. So that's why working in partnership with someone who's based close to where you live, or at least someone who works for an institution there, is a good idea. But for Geneva, it's basically the cantonal Office Cantonal de la Population, so the OCP, it's called, for the people who deal with work permit applications. They're based in the center of Geneva. And in Lausanne, it's the Population Service, Service de la Population. So they have a bit of a different name already. So basically, when you go there to apply for a work permit, you need to have a solid file. So I met people who said, well, you know, I just applied and asked for a permit, and their business idea was very fluffy. Like, yeah, I want to do consulting, and I'll just apply for a permit, or yeah, I've worked maybe in another country and I'll just say I'm working now in Switzerland and apply for a permit. It's not as easy. You need to really show that you have something going for yourself. So that's why I really, really recommend that you get someone to support you through this process, someone who's a French speaker if you're going to apply in Geneva, or someone who's a German speaker, maybe if you're in Zurich. So make sure you're not going alone. And the reason why I'm saying this is if you're not mastering the language very well, that is, you know, French, obviously in Geneva, you may have difficulties to understand what you need for your file. So the first thing is really to get the information on how to do the file right. I will give you some pointers. And the second thing is to go there if you're going to make a visit with someone who can explain things to you very well, or translate if you don't master French very well. Because, and the reason why I say this, because if you, let's say you miss documents or you send the wrong thing, and it's going to create a bad mark against your file. So, you know, it's the same thing when you apply for any kind of thing. If you're going to college, for example, I remember when I applied at university, I made sure I went through the checklist and I had everything included. Because if people have to keep reminding you and you have a lot of exchanges, you know, it creates a little bit of a negative feeling towards you, you know, like, oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing. So again, make sure that you give them from the beginning the right information. So again, lawyers also could be helpful if you have what I call a complex file, meaning you're outside of EU, and your business also might need a lot of approvals and can get quite complicated based on what you're doing. Again, the links to the two that I know the best, the Geneva one and Lausanne one, I will send to you in the message on Meetup. So before I go any further, any questions on work permits before I move to my next phase of the presentation? Well, maybe you think about the questions also as we go on work permits. So the second thing is really about special approvals and also websites. If you plan to have a website, you should check, and I will give you the link for that. There's a registry where you can see all the websites registered for a name. And that's something that's going to be linked to the business you're creating. So for example, my business name, Pleiad HC, why is it called Pleiad HC? Because I knew with this mixture of words, probably there's a weak chance that someone has the exact same name. Pleiad, a lot of companies use Pleiad because it's used for training modules. Pleiad also in French means a group of basically intellectuals. And the reason why I'm using Pleiad is because, again, it means the knowledge. It means also it's a constellation of stars, and I'm helping people find their potential. So there's a bunch of reasons, and HC for human capital. But the mixture of Pleiad HC is a bit complex, so chances are not many people will use it. So you have to think about, if you want to create a business, a lot of people think about easy words, you know, to remember. That's very important. Your clients have to remember you. But you also need to think about potential to be copied and to be used somewhere else. For example, if you're going to have a website where you might have a lot of people that use that connection with some other thing, it might have a bad reputation on your business. So for example, if you have, I'll just give you a funky example. If your website is called beauty, for example, beauty.com. Probably some people might have beautiful girls or beauty and hot or things you don't really want to be connected with. So you have to remember about what are the connections of words that people can make that might look bad later on if people do a search on Google. So it's all these different things which to me are just as important in the start of business creation as just the finding for the paperwork by itself. So the website is called Ziflix, or Zifix, sorry, with an X. And I'll send that to you in the links as well. So the other thing you need to be concerned with, it's about special approvals. So in Switzerland, there's this, and I think in other countries as well, there are some special approvals you need to request to start a business. So for example, Financial services is a good example. You can't just say, okay, tomorrow I'm opening Isabel Financial Services. I need to make sure I have approvals to sell financial services in Switzerland. Another example actually closer to my business is placement. I can't place people. I don't have authorization for that. So I can't call a company and say, you know, I'm placing this person with you. That's placement agency. The other thing is food sector, for example. If you open a restaurant or, you know, food industry, you need authorization. Anything also with legal, you know, you need to be able to practice, medical, and import export is also part of the stories where you need an approval. You know, there's also taxation involved, etc. So I don't get too much into details, but you need to really think this through. And there's this new notion. I just attended a seminar with the Chamber of Commerce about, and you need to know this as well for your business, it's called Swissness. So it's a new law that's effective 1/1/2017. And basically what it's doing, it's really pursuing an earlier legal decision that was to prevent companies to use the flag and the cross of Switzerland in inappropriate ways. So if you have many products, for example, all over the world that are using the flag or using the notion of Swiss to sell, because the notion of Swiss is something where people, you know, they already have in their mind maybe chocolate, maybe milk, nature, all these things. So it's quite positive, and I think it's a selling point, definitely, and a lot of companies want to use this in their business. So I've seen so many things with the Swiss flags. You probably do as well every day in the grocery store, for example. So this is going to be very much pursued as of 1/1/2017. If your product is not made in Switzerland, it's made in some other country, and you use the Swiss flag, you will have issues. So be careful with that, depending on the product you want to launch. And that's just if you want to use the made in Switzerland notion, you will have to check that it's really made in Switzerland, basically, with Swiss products, etc. So it was just an interesting side note I wanted to make, because again, if you're going to use the made in Switzerland, to understand that now there's going to be a law that actually is in place as of 1/1/2017. And the website, I'll put it up also for you. It's called the LPI, so it's the intellectual property website for Switzerland. So that's an important notion. The service that's actually, there's 2 offices in Switzerland that deal with helping you also on the type of product you want to launch, the authorization. It's the promotion service de la promotion économique, so economic promotion services, and they answer also questions about approvals, etc. And the other big partner, so to say, you should connect with is the Chamber of Commerce. They're there to help you. They also do a lot of seminars. I try to go as much as I can because they're very interesting. They usually have key speakers from different sectors depending on the topic, and they cover the topic, and then there's a questions and answer. There's also a cocktail or a breakfast, so you can, again, engage with local people and also develop your business. So the Chamber of Commerce is, it's a big place. They're in Plainpalais in Geneva, so they're very central and very easy to find as well. You will have the link, so you will see their events, and maybe you can start attending. So before I move to the actual registration and the frontalier, any questions? I'm trying to see online. Okay, so registration of your business. Someone asked me about the frontalier status. I think that I wanted to make a note of that because I think it's important, the frontalier status. So basically, frontalier means that you live in a country and you work in another country. So there's quite a few in Switzerland. That can be also in different places, but basically it means you work in a country and you live in another country. And of course, there's pluses and minuses to being a frontalier, and I think probably those of you who are frontalier understand this very well. There's issues with living in a country and working in another one, and the first main issue is taxes, because obviously taxes work with where you're based. So, and you have to take into account the fact you work somewhere else. So I would say right offhand that it is complicated. So sometimes you have to do it for different reasons. Maybe you live with someone and for whatever reason you need to live in a special country. It's also economical because in Switzerland, if you live in France, for example, cost of living is a little bit cheaper. So anyway, I won't get into reasons, but just to know that if you make this choice, there's consequences, and usually it's tax consequences. It's also cover. And there has been a change in the law with the medical cover, which is quite impactful for both people who are working as employees and people who are entrepreneurs. It used to be that you were private with covered with private insurance, and nowadays you have to choose between the Swiss insurance or the French insurance, and both of them are expensive. So it's like another layer of complexity there that you have to pay for and an expense. But anyway, so basically, frontalier, you also have to go back to work permit. So there's, to me, 4 things to know about the frontalier status if you're wondering whether you should be one or you're one and you're wondering. So the first one is the G work permit, which in my view is definitely a lower work permit, to call it that way, or a weaker work permit than the B or C. Because if you're in a B or C permit, you're in the country, so you're secure, you have you've been accepted as part of the residents in the country. G permit is basically you're a guest. And the day, there's changes in politics or changes in whatever economical changes, you just have to know your permit can be gone, basically. If there's a change and from the day to the other, people can say we don't accept frontalier anymore, we reduce tremendously. You just are very much tied to, again, legal and political decisions. So you have to know this as well when you decide to be a frontalier, that your status is going to be a little bit more weaker than the other statuses. But you can still apply now, and there's still you can be granted a G permit. The other thing is that if you start a business and you choose, or you are a frontalier, you will for sure have to get an address in Switzerland to open a business. And that's for any business, even if you're just independent worker. So that means it's an expense. You need to get a lease, and that's mandatory as well to be approved. So if you just say, for example, I just get maybe something that I sublease every month or whatever, it doesn't work. It has to be an address with a lease, and you're there for a while, at least a year. So you need to sign at least a 1-year lease. That's the mandatory requirement. So again, it's an expense. And if you live in Switzerland already, you can use your home, for example. So there's also a trade-off there. If you open an SARL or an SA, which I will discuss in a moment, you need absolutely to have a business partner. You can't, so that's another thing you can't do as a frontalier. You can't open a business in Switzerland on your own if you're SARL or SA, which you could do as a Swiss, but you can't do that if you live abroad. So you need to have a Swiss partner for sure, and that changes your business model maybe a little bit as well, because it's an obligation. So if you're frontalier right now and you think about what I just said, my advice would be to start small. So if you're thinking, yeah, business partner, etc., that's also an expense. Start small. Start with the independent worker status. That's the one that's easiest to get. And then if you see you get business coming in, then maybe you can later on find a partner in Switzerland. And also to get a partner, you need to have already a level of credibility anyways. So it will be easier to get a partner when you're already credible on the market and you have business than if you just say, yeah, I've got this great idea, who's in? Probably people will be a bit scared, etc. So that would be my recommendation again. So that's the side note on the frontalier. Any questions on it? Because I know it's an important topic in Geneva, because there is an impact on what you can and cannot do, and the G permit is also linked to what you're doing. So if you work for a company, as I said, the day when this company lays you off or you're fired or what have you, you have a small period when you can still keep it, but after that it's gone. So, and you will need to reapply for the work permit with your next organization. So it's not for life, basically, and there's usually a validation on the back of the permit. So even if you do stay with the same organization, it will have to be renewed anyways. So any questions on work permit? Again, if you think about them later, it's not a problem. So I want to talk about now the registration process. I will keep in my mind that you're an expat, but then if you're Swiss, of course, It's similar. It's a similar process. So the first thing is really to think about what you need, the documents that you need for sure before you think about any registration. So for me, it's really the name of the company and the business plan. Even if you file for independent status, people need to understand what you're trying to do. So you don't need a full-fledged business plan, but just have some kind of an idea where you're going. I have a one-page business plan template I use with clients. So it's just to answer some of the questions I mentioned earlier and just have an idea of what you're doing. You will need an address in Switzerland. That's for anyone. So if you're already in Switzerland, you can use your home. But as an independent worker, it would work basically because let's say you do consulting, maybe you go to the client most of the time, and that's a reduced expense. But when you're a frontalier, you have to show that you have an address in Switzerland, at least with a lease of 1 year. So it makes you actually sign up for a lease. The other thing you will need is some kind of funding. You need to show that when you start an activity, you have a bit of funds. So when you start with an independent status, you don't need to show that you have an amount as the other statuses, a big amount, but at least you need to show that, okay, maybe you've worked in Switzerland for a while, you have a bit of money aside, or you're coming from abroad, but you're bringing in some funds with you, and they will want to know this, that you're not starting from zero. I think starting from zero would be dangerous for you because I think the situation with starting with zero, especially if you have some expenses to pay, I think it's different if you're a student and maybe you live with your parents, so you don't have as many expenses. But if you're an adult and you have expenses as everyone else on the planet, it would be hard to actually be motivated if you need to bring income and build a business at the same time. So the way to do this would be, in my view, to stay employed until you have some money aside where you can start things. And you can start maybe when you're still employed, and just have a plan where you say, okay, I'm employed for the next year, maybe until I have enough money aside, and then I go for it. But definitely my advice would not be to jump from nowhere and just say, okay, tomorrow I'm starting a business with zero. I think it'd be putting you in a difficult situation. So once you have these things set up, there are two players that are going to be important for you in starting your business, especially if you go for the SARL or the SA status. I would say anything else but independent worker. It's the notary and the fiduciary. So the notary in Switzerland will be someone that basically where you need to get your business signed up for. And the fiduciary would be someone that can help you with your accounting, and you will need them anyways. When you're SA or SARL, it's mandatory. So with the notary, when you make the appointment with them, you need to show also that you have a business plan, that you have an address in Switzerland, and that you have some money aside. Because there's an amount that you need to show for the SARL, and this amount is basically 20,000. But I will talk about that in a minute. But basically, you need to have these people in your circle already, the notary and the fiduciary. The place to register a company is not mandatory under 100,000. So I know I have people that are quite impatient to register. First of all, it costs money. I don't remember, I think it's 100 francs. It's not a huge amount, but I wouldn't register a business unless it was required. And it's required for SARL and SA. But for independent worker under 100,000 of income, you don't need to register. So again, it could be also the reason why people would register under 100,000 of revenues is because it's a credibility factor. If you say I'm registered, it looks better, it looks more serious. It's a plus. Let's just put it that way. It's a plus. But if it's not required, you have to remember one of the things, if you register, if you change your address, you have to register again. You have to change your registration. So it's another 100 that you need to pay 100 francs. So again, think about whether at the beginning, I don't think it's a priority if you sign up as an independent worker. But if you go for the other statuses, of course, you need to apply. So, so the company register is based in Geneva. I will send you the link also in case you want to register your company there. And I will send you also the list of the notaries. These will be very important people. The other people you need to include potentially, I'm just saying potentially because it's an expense And I think you would only need them if you have a difficult case. So for example, you're from a non-EU country, your business model also, you need to really show that you have a good business model and that you have a good potential business, because you will need to be approved for the work permit. So lawyers, I would say, are not necessarily people that you need to see immediately, unless you have a lot of questions, again, around your status, around what is the process for non-EU mostly. Otherwise, it's fairly simple, the process for EU and for the work permit and so forth. So what I would check for when you pick, and that's actually the thing that I would advise across the board when picking someone to help you, is really to ask for different quotes. So whether it's a notary, a lawyer, just make sure you get different quotes, because it can vary quite a bit. So you want to make sure that you have the right price, and it can go from single to double to triple based on who you're contacting. So make sure you know what you're looking for. Otherwise, they will sell you services you don't need, and make sure you get different quotes so you can compare. So with the lawyers, basically, what I would check for is their experience in immigration law, especially if they're going to support you with work permits. What kind of languages are spoken? I know when I was doing research for a client, it's very hard to find good people who speak very good English. So it's going to be a problem. If you're applying for a permit, you want to make sure that you can understand each other and you have the right documents, etc. So I would say you need a reasonably good level of English in your legal services. If you can't speak French, I'm saying that's going to be important. And also how they work. Are they going to charge you hourly? And that can go up quite quickly if they have to do a lot of work with you. Are they going to charge you a flat rate? Remember, if your case is complicated, they will probably want to add hours. But then if you need them just for something small, make sure that you don't go and spend tons of money on a huge package that you don't need. So I wanted to give you the link for, there's a legal office in Geneva, and they answer basic questions. So I can send you the link for that. It's only 50 francs for a 30-minute consultation. So make sure you ask them, but they only speak French, I believe. So that's only for people who can speak French. But there's, so that's a service that's available to the community. It's a legal service. They call that Permanence. And they have the same thing with medical services in Geneva, Permanence. Otherwise, if you need to consult with an English-speaking lawyer, make sure that you're clear from the beginning how they will charge you, so that you don't go and spend lots of money. And the other way to save some money is to say, okay, maybe I use the lawyer to give me the basics, and then the rest I just do on my own. So once you know the pointers, you already have a lot in this presentation, but if you need more detailed pointers, the lawyer can give that to you, and then you can maybe do the writing on your own and the process on your own. The thing that is helpful with lawyers, and I've used lawyers myself when I was working in human resources for permits, is that they have links with individuals inside the offices where you are requesting for permits. So your chances of being approved are higher, basically, because they have connections and they can support your file. They also write the letters in a certain way that people like to see the materials, and it's going to be in the language also of the person reading the documents. So they will prepare the documents for you, and they will write it in a certain way that the office wants to see it. So I think these are pluses, definitely, especially if you know you're going to have a hard permit to get. So again, for anything EU nationalities, you're covered. If you're non-EU and you're applying for a business, starting a business permit, you want to be well surrounded so that you can get the approvals. Fiduciary is the same thing. Make sure you have someone who can speak English, who's competent, obviously, how they're going to charge you, where are they based. If you need to meet with somebody, make sure they live close by, even though you can use fiduciary anywhere, it's authorized. I would pick someone that's close and that can understand your needs and doesn't overcharge you, obviously, for things you don't need. So same thing, it's also the scrutiny at the beginning of who you're working for or with. What kind of documents do they need from you? How much are they going to charge you? They take advantage sometimes of the fact you don't know the local rules, so to say, to sell you services you don't need. So I think the important thing is to go there informed already with some basics, so that you know exactly what you're looking for. And when you meet, you say, this is what I want, and how much do you charge? And you don't want to give them too much leeway to say, oh, and by the way, you need this and this. No, I don't, because I've checked already online and I know that's all I need. So with all the links I will send you today, you will have already a lot of information on processes with the Office Cantonal. Even if you choose not to do it yourself and have someone do your work permit, for example, you know what's needed already. And it's just having someone do it for you. So it's information is power. So the more you can find out, the more you've done your research, you can go to someone to support you, but you already know what you need. So that's for the partners you will need to make your application dream come true, to support you and help you get the documents that you need. Any question at this stage? Just getting a bit of water. Okay, no questions for the moment. So the different statuses in Switzerland. So there's 3 I've been mentioning back and forth, but I want to get more now into details about the statuses. So the first one is really the individual status. So it's called raison individuelle in French. It's basically the status for consultants, and so if you go into professions such as consulting or therapists or designers, things like that, usually you're independent, you work on your own, and the status is very much adapted for that, to work as a solo person. But I also think now, going back, I mean, obviously I picked it because I am a consultant. I think it can also be used if you're trying to build something bigger, especially if you're non-EU or you have a permit thing that you want to get, and you don't want to get yourself into the other statuses yet, or you want to still test a little bit the clients and everything. And actually, I believe Fiduciaire will give you this advice as well. Sometimes being a raison individuelle, it's faster to actually go through the process. It gives you a status to be able to work. And you don't have to do the whole spiel that you have to do for the other statuses. So basically, you don't need any funding. That's already a good plus. So you can start fairly easily. You don't need to register with the commerce registry under 100,000. So typically when you start, you haven't made that much money. There's a unique taxation that also simplifies the process. That means you can do your taxes on your own. You don't need somebody to do them for you. That's a huge saving right there. You can also just register with the AVS. I will talk about it in a minute, basically for your retirement and so forth. So that's it. I just mentioned it right now, 4 points, very simple and quick. The only minus I would say you have to be careful with is that they consider you as it, considering that you're the company and you're the individual. So meaning your fortune or your assets are linked to your business. So for example, if someone sues you and they're very bad, they can claim your assets. They can say, okay, you owe 50, 100,000 Swiss francs. We're going to come and take, whatever, your apartment or what have you. So if you're going to go for a business where there's risk involved, I would probably suggest to be careful with the status, because again, it's mixed. So if people go against you, and I remember talking to a client about that. Anything where people can hurt themselves, I think, is a good way to tell. So, for example, if you're selling products where you can burn yourself, or actually food, people can get very sick, and it's not necessarily your fault. Anything that can hurt the individual, I think, physically would be something I would be worried about, because people being so happy these days, I would really be careful about that. But otherwise, the raison individuelle is quite an easy status to obtain, very light. The administration is quite light. You just need to have a simple, earnings and expenses type of spreadsheet where you keep track. You just invoice your clients, and that's it. You don't have to build up a whole administration around it. So very easy status to start. The thing about registering for retirement, there's 3 offices that do that in Geneva, and I will give you the links for that. You can compare them and see how they fare. Basically, the NOD is the one that's known for the independent worker as being the expert for the independent worker insurance cover. FAIR is one for probably if you want also to be part of a hub, invited to events and things like that, so they can also register you. And then there's the OCAS, OCAS, and that's the Office for the Compensation. So if your retirement, accident insurance, all these things. So you can compare them, see how much they charge you, what do they offer as services. I know, for example, OCAS, you don't really get services really. I know with FAIR, I picked them because they have great service. They're extremely fast, they answer immediately. So there's lots of things that you may value as being important when you pick an office where you want to register. So that's it for the consultant that wants to start something tomorrow. If you have your idea and you have your business model and what you want to do, you can start fairly quickly. The other status, the second status out of the 3 is it's a bit different. Now I can really talk about a company when the other one was more independent consultant, freelance. Now we're moving more towards a company, meaning that your being is different from the company. So already your expenses of the company and your fortune are separate. So if someone sues you or what have you, they're not coming after your house, basically. So you've separated the 2. It could be also something that you do gives you a peace of mind. The other plus is that it gives you credibility. You actually have a business in place with a structure, and typically, you know, you will have an office, obviously, to get the company going. And of course, if you're non-Swiss, you have to have a business partner. So you're already 2 in the organization from the beginning. There's also a minimum amount you need aside. It's the 20,000 that you will have to show when you register. So in a separate bank account, you need to have those 20,000 available for the business. You need to register with a notary. That's when you need the notary and the fiduciary to actually, they will keep your accounting also because they will have to do the summary at the end of the year. That's also mandatory, whereas as an independent worker, it's not mandatory. And also you will have to taxation, and that's when seeing the fiduciary anyway might be a good idea at the beginning, because with the SARL status, it is definitely separate. So your personal income, I mean your personal assets and the company are separated. When you file, for example, as an individual worker, it's all mixed. So your total fortune is all one report. So again, that could have some impact on the level of taxation that the Swiss ask for to pay, obviously. So make sure that you do a comparison, especially if you have a lot of assets. Let's say you have several apartments that you're renting already and in different countries. I mean, let's make something very complex there as a situation. You have several apartments, you're getting rent from several countries. You also own, you know, different things. So it can get quite big. And that's when a comparison might be helpful of how much tax would you pay with this status versus this status. And you can go with an income projected for the year. So that's the SARL status. It's usually used for, I would say, small businesses. So if you're starting, for example, a nail business in the center of Geneva, or hairdresser, or fiduciaire, for example. So any small business typically has the SARL status, and you've probably seen it at the end of the company name. It's quite visible, SARL. So that's the small business. So already there, it's like impactful in people's mind. If you have these letters, that means you are a company versus someone who's a freelance. So let's say with my name of company, Pleiad HC, there's not SARL in the back, so people know it's an independent status. And when you're SA, you also have the letters at the end. So that's just to give you an idea as a client, when you look at a website, you can tell if someone what status they have. The next status I will talk about is the SA status. That's the Société Anonyme, anonymous society, to translate it. But anyway, it's the status for basically the big businesses. So if you have big multinationals, usually when they register in Switzerland, they have SA, or let's say you have just a big companies with many employees, you will go for the SA status. Also, if you plan to do big business, it's a credible status. So if you're going to sell, and that's why I say it's important in your business plan to know where you're going. If you target big companies, if you have anything but an SA status, they're going to laugh, basically. It's you have to be credible. So if you go for the big guys, you need to have a big card, a big business card to play. So you need to be registered with the right name and the right status. So if you plan to go big already, to go for big clients, I mean, in your business model, SA will probably come up as something that will be a necessary setup to have from the beginning. And again, probably fiduciary will give you also different advice, and you have to think about that. But for credibility reasons, and also depending on what business you target. For example, in my sector of self-development and training, people really don't look at those things. But if you go for maybe more real estate or, again, financial services, I think people will pay attention to the size a little bit more and how you work. So these are things that definitely of interest. So for the SA, it's basically the same requirements I've just mentioned. You need to go with the notary to get signed up, have the registry signed up, have a business partner, and you will need a bigger amount of funding. That's basically the difference. So that's why I say credibility, because people know if you're an SA, you already have 100,000 in your treasury. So you're bigger than someone who starts from zero or someone who has 20,000. So that's where the size matters. So funding 100,000 that you need to set aside from the beginning, and all the different registrations I just mentioned, so notary, etc., etc. And basically in the SARL status or SA status, you're not it as you are as an independent consultant, meaning you are employed by your organization. So you have to get yourself a salary, basically. So you will still need to pay for the retirement, what I call social insurance. Insurance is a personal thing, in my view. There's what you need to have for sure, which is the AVS, the survivor, it's called in Switzerland, worker, etc. Anything else is usually an option in Switzerland. So they have like these different levels of cover. And that becomes more of a personal thing. It's what do you want as a cover from the beginning, and medical insurance and so forth. These are all going to be expenses for you. So that's why I say it's a status that can be interesting if you're going for something big and you want credibility. However, the expenses are going to be also bigger. When you go for a company such as SARL or SA, the expenses are much more. You need to pay your taxes on a regular basis. I mean yearly, but you have to pay expenses on a regular basis that are quite high usually. And usually you have also employees in those different statuses. So you will also have to pay for an employee. Yeah, this is definitely something of the next level, so to say. You already have a lot of cash coming in. So if you don't have a plan to have a lot of cash coming in, I don't think those statuses will help you, because they will be expenses for you from the beginning with all the different registrations and paperwork, etc. So, yeah, I think it's important to make the comparison between the independent worker and the company's company status, and which one suits you to do what you want to do, what you want to achieve, because it can really be a catalyzer, something that really helps you get what you want, or it can be something that is going to slow you down because it already cost you so much money to start. So again, my recommendation would be to already have a good business model where you make some money. So in Switzerland, they're not making you register the day when you start a business. So for example, it's actually required that you have some kind of proof that you have an activity. So if you go to the office and you say, I've got an idea, I want to do this business, register me, they're not going to do it. So that's why I'm trying to save you some time there. It's important to get started already. And then when you have something that's working, then you go and register, and you can say, look, I've been selling t-shirts online, and now I have 10 clients, and I'm actually starting to make some money. You know, and now I want to register my t-shirt making company. Or, you know, I'm a consultant, and anyway, as a consultant, you need to have 3 invoices already to get registered. So if you don't have any clients yet, I would say don't even bother. worry about getting clients. And once you start having some clients, I would say more than 3, then you can say, okay, now I'm registering. But it's a catch-22 as well, because companies usually want to show that you're registered. When you're a consultant, it really depends where you go. People ask me sometimes, do I really need to be registered? And I think it depends on who you target. Sometimes in NGOs, for example, they can have an issue. I know I had the issue where I worked, when I was told as HR specifically, people need to be registered, otherwise it's going to be a problem in our accounting if they haven't, because that means these people are basically working black market. They don't have any social cover. So then as an employer, if you take them as a consultant, who is going to pay for their social cover? You know, you're making them work illegally in a way. So if you're going to target a company, probably they will want to see that you're registered, again, depending on how they're set up. Sometimes with the UN also, you may need to show that you're set up. So I would say try to find 3 clients that maybe are not companies, where you can work with them. And then once you show that you can have 3 invoices with a client, then you can go and register. And then you can target the bigger companies once you have the status. So that would be my way of doing it. 3 invoices shouldn't be difficult if you have a good product or a good service that people want to buy. And that's also, I think, a very good idea, because why would you want to spend money and effort in registering when you don't even have proof you have clients? So really testing the market is very important. I've seen too many people, and now it's been over a year, because before I was working in a consulting firm, that I see people coming up with ideas, and the first thing they say is, I want to be registered somewhere. I say, well, what's your business? Do you even have clients? Do you even know who are your clients? So it's really not worth thinking about registration if you're not advanced already in your business plan and model, where you know that you have something that will sell. So whether it's a service or it's a product, you know you're selling something and you know it's going well, and you can show in your income that it's going higher. Then you can say, okay, now I've been selling something for a few months, I'm starting to make some income, I need to register. But before that, I would say don't even worry about it. Worry about having a good business model that will bring you income, and finding clients that are interested in your product. And most people are not quite sure on that. They're not quite sure where their clients are, how much they're willing to pay to buy their products, how to find them, which I'm doing another webinar later on the topic, how to find clients. That's going to be key at the beginning. It's really, where are your clients, what are you selling to them, and are they paying for it? And then after that, you can see also, it will help you find out what's the most appropriate status. Because sometimes when you start, and I've seen many entrepreneurs who can share this experience, sometimes when you start, you think, okay, this is the direction I'm going towards, and this is who I'm selling to. And then after a while, you realize, actually, I'm going in a different direction, which is okay, but you just didn't imagine it this way. So for example, when I started at the very, very beginning, I thought, when I started with my idea, I thought, I'm going towards companies, I'm going to sell outplacement services. And then I realized the market was already very tight and a lot of players already in the industry. And then I switched more towards individuals, and I realized also that's what worked for me. That's where I had the most value. That's also a market that was a little bit forgotten, because now companies are paying less and less to help people find a job. So it was really a missing point in the market of people that were not getting any kind of services. So maybe you notice something as you're going as well, where you say, yeah, I'm making blue t-shirts. And then after a while, you realize, wow, there's lots of people making blue t-shirts, but I'm getting a lot of requests for red t-shirts. So maybe that's where I should go. And then I need a different, maybe, type of business model. So it's basically, as you're testing things, that you see what works and what doesn't. And I would say don't spend too much from the beginning. And even experienced entrepreneurs make the mistake of investing too much at the beginning for something they haven't proved that it works. So I've been there also on other things, side things, where I thought, okay, I have a great idea and I think it could work. And I'm investing money, and then I realize the client is not coming. Why? I should have thought about, do I have clients coming in first and then start the business? So it's really, It's really about what would sell, basically. And then the status is an easy thing to go through. And again, then once you have something good, people will come to you and say, I want to work with you. I like what you're doing. I like what you represent, and I want to work with you in your business. And then you attract also a different type of, I think, business partners. They also bring in something, because at the beginning, usually, maybe you have people who have an idea, but they're not bringing anything. They say, yeah, I want to be part of the business. Well, what are you bringing to the table? Well, I don't know. I just want to help you, and I like what you do. What are you bringing to the table? In business partnerships, it's usually everyone is bringing something, experience. They're bringing, they have contacts, something that you can use for your business. So they're very technical. But if you have a group of people that are thinking and say, let's start a business, it's great. It's like a business club or what have you, but no one is really driving something forward. So you need a lot of checks to be successful. You need to have people that are driven, that are bringing real competencies. That's another thing I see that's lacking from a lot of people. They want to start a business, but they're lacking a lot of competencies. So already from the beginning, if you're someone that, let's say, wants to work with a business partner, and this person needs to bring you something. It's not just a friend or someone you know. It has to be someone that is complementary to you. So if you're the sales type of person, then you need the technical person, and vice versa. So you need to think about what is the value that we're bringing as working together in this partnership. It's not about, the friends and so forth, because I think that could be a pitfall. Also, that's another thing I'm not discussing in depth in this webinar, but I would be cautious about. It's the personal relationships in business. So if someone is really close to you in terms of your friends or your family, probably doing business together might be frictions. I would separate that from businesses that are from families, where there's ownership, and then the son and the sons just take over. That's a bit different. But to start a business with friends or with family, I would say be careful with that. So I'm just checking time now. I see that it's flying when you're having fun, right? I'm just checking for questions again. And again, I can look later if you have a question. So I have a few questions for you. The first one is, do you suggest I do a professional website to get credibility? That's definitely something I would do, because people will look at your documents, meaning your business card, your website, as a selection factor. It's the same thing in an interview. If you come dressed in jeans and t-shirt, you're not going to make the same impact as someone who's suited up. So appearance matters. So if you want to be credible, it's going to be linked to what you're showing externally. So if you have a website that's not working, where there's errors, I know there's a lot of good websites now you can do on your own, but be careful of who you're targeting and how you present yourself, because if you have a shady website, probably if you target companies, for example, you're not going to be credible. If you're targeting well-established big businesses and you're coming with your Wix website, probably they don't take you seriously. So again, and then if you're a therapist, for example, and you're targeting, people maybe in the community, they won't be as disturbed by a Wix website. But again, it's who are you targeting? Are they going to pay attention to those things? But I would say at some point, investing in a good website is worth it. You will have also better support. You don't have to worry about it. If you have a technical issue, you can ask your webmaster. They can also deal with your improvement of your performance on Google. So really, I think in the end, it's very technical. So spending all this time as an entrepreneur, it's not worth it in my view. But that's a decision I made early on. So that's for the website. Highly recommend you do something professional. The other question you may have is, how much does it cost to go to an attorney or to go to a fiduciary? They all have different prices, so it can really go, again, as I say, from 50 francs if you go to for half an hour, if you go to a lawyer, next door for basic advice, and it can go up to several hundred thousand. Several hundred Swiss francs if you go for full-fledged, package or consultation. So you really have to think about that, how much it will cost you, and what kind of services you need before you go there. And the last question I think you may have in your head is, do I need to take on accident insurance? So again, the insurance thing is also based on what you're doing. So for example, I'm a consultant. My job is to be either behind my screen or in a meeting with somebody around a table. So the risk of accident is quite low, I would say, unless I trip on my cord, actually, which is not well set up today. But really, the accident insurance is not mandatory. If you're going to work where you're in out in the field meeting with clients, where you have to go through shady areas where there's plugs everywhere, and I'm thinking immediately, the movie industry. If you're working and you have a bunch of cables everywhere and all that, you may want accident insurance. Or if you're going to be working with build up materials from building apartments, for example. If you're going to go and enter and there's just stuff all over the floor and things like that. So think about your day-to-day in the job. Are you going to be somewhere in the field with lots of things lying everywhere, or are you going to be behind a desk, basically? But the accident insurance, again, for me, would not be my number one priority. When you set up a business, you have to keep your costs down. And I think that's one of the pitfalls. People want to do things in the right way, which I appreciate that. And they want to be well covered. I think in Switzerland, definitely it's a country of insurance, but you have to think also about your ability to sustain yourself. So it's almost thinking about your business as survival. So if you want to run faster and to be sustainable, you have to be lean. I'm linking them to the lean model that companies use, but the leaner your business is, the faster you can grow. So if you already start with an expense, paying for offices, and you have all kinds of insurance, and you're hiring someone immediately when the business is not coming in yet, all these are going to be minuses in your expenses, and you're not even making income yet. So I would really caution you on make the business first, make the sales first, even if you have to try to do many things on your own at the beginning. And then once you start getting the income, then you can say, okay, now maybe I get someone to help, or maybe I pick a bit better of an insurance for myself now, etc., etc. But keep it lean would be my last word for this webinar. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were able to get a lot of good tips from me. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate. I will be answering them throughout the day. And my next webinar in July will be about women back to work, because I think it's quite difficult for women who have been away from the workspace to come back. So I thought I'd do a webinar on the topic, and I'm especially motivated to do it because, of course, I'm a woman, but I do think we need to support each other in that, in getting more advancement possibilities and to be heard a little bit more. So I will do a specific webinar in July on that. So I hope you have a nice day, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.